So we are going to be looking at how to apply a gradient to text. Now, you will notice that I can click on this text and I can choose as many gradients as I want. And it might even tell me that even in my appearance panel, that I have a gradient fill applied to this text, but it's clearly not um, the case. It's still black. So if I approach this at, okay, I'm going to turn it to blue, it responded to that. Now, you can apply um, a gradient to text, but you have to turn that text into a shape first. Um, so you need to make sure that all of the changes that you want to be made with the editable text have happened beforehand. So if I want my character to be larger than this, 72, oops, or if I wanted to change, why don't we just change it to a Bodini? Changing my font, or if I want to make sure, actually I'm going to leave that as it is. If I want to change the size of it, so maybe to 90 points, that I do all of that before I outline my text. This could even include your tracking or leading. So if I wanted to increase my tracking, I want to do that ahead of time. You put it at 50, and I'm going to lower my font size just a little bit. So just increased a little bit of space there. So now what I want to do is go up into the type tool and I want to create outlines. And I purposely did this because I'm in the type tool right now. But notice I can't change, this is grayed out, and so that's a problem. But that's just because I'm in the type tool. So I actually need to select the object, which is all of this text together, and get out of the type tool. And then when I go back up to create outlines, it'll allow me to do so. Now let's go into the layers and see what just happened. So you can see that now my type is a group, and I'm going to Command Z. This is what it was. When it is a type layer, it'll say this is my, or whatever if I click on world, it says world. That is a way that I know that this is in fact a text box, and it is a text tool or a text object. And what I want to do is, again, go back to that type, create outlines, and now it is a bunch of shapes that include compound paths. And again, a compound path is a regular path that is a more complex shape, so it might have holes in it. Um, is typically what makes a compound path. So I'm going to ungroup these. Actually, we're going to keep them grouped first. So now if I come here and I select that, that gradient is now applied to each individual letter. And that's not really what I wanted. I wanted my gradient to stretch across this entire group. So I'm going to Command Z, and I'm going to go back to that blue. And with all of these objects selected, I'm going to create another more complex compound path. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to make. Now I have all of these letters. They have no fill. It dropped my fill, so I'm going to add a fill back. All of these letters now are part of a compound path. But again, they are individual shapes that have been connected together. Now, if I choose to create a compound path or apply that gradient to a compound path, now you'll see that the yellow starts with a T and it gets increasingly darker and changes hue to red in the Y. So again, let's looking at that again. So let's see just comparatively, if I change the word world, I'm in the black arrow tool, and then I can go up to type, create outlines, or shift command O. Now that turns it into a series of compound paths. So if I apply my gradient, if I come up here to my swatches panel, click on just whatever gradients that's available, now I can see the difference between these two. This is a series of compound paths, and the gradient is applied to each individual compound path. So the D has its own gradient, the L has its own gradient, the R and so on has their own gradient, where when I select the this is my world, and that is I connected all of those letters and made one compound path. Then I can stretch that gradient across the whole thing. So I can even come now and say, I'm going to take this word, the world, and I'm going to stretch and make that a compound path, apply that gradient, and now that has the gradient applied. Let's say, just for fun, we want to take a gradient and we want to apply the gradient to this circle and world and have it apply to the same gradient. Well, you can do that. You can select, I have all three selected, and I'm going to create yet another compound path. So I'm going to go to Object, come down to Compound Path, and Make. And now I have all of the objects selected, and I have a gradient that covers the entire thing. Now, I could edit that gradient and turn it into a radial gradient. I can access my gradient tool as I had before and move that around. So I have, the red just affecting this. I could even change it into points and, oh, it's not going to let me do points. So maybe not the points. Interesting. On a compound path. So, but we can definitely do radial and linear gradients. So that's how you would apply a gradient to text or a compound path.